Welcome to the Julie Chan Show, where passion meets purpose. Today, I am joined by Dorothy Andreas, who has been doing so well in business and writing books and coaching, and you just have a plethora of knowledge and expertise and have done so well over the years. Let's first talk about your passion for building a business.
Oh, thank you so much, Julie. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. It wasn't the path that I started out on. I never visualized myself really doing it or doing it anything close to like what it turned out to be. But it was, I was 19 years old. I was working 3 part-time jobs to put myself through college. I had gone to beauty school during my high school years. And I got a scholarship. I got my teaching license for cosmetology. And I thought, well, if I become a certified teacher, I was from Pennsylvania, in the state of Pennsylvania, you would make more money. So I thought, okay, great. That's what I'm going for. And so I was 19, it was challenging. I didn't have family support. I didn't have financial support. And this hair salon came up for sale a couple blocks away from my home. So unbeknownst to anybody, I went and I met with the owner and I said, I'd really like to buy your business. And she said, well, aren't you really young? And I looked at her like she was crazy. And I said, I'm 19, and she said, well, how are you going to get the money to pay me? And I said, well, I can sell my car because I've always worked. I have this car. So she said, if you sign this contract, you have to pay me in 7 days. So, this was 1980. And so I went home that day from meeting with her, and I was so excited. I couldn't wait to tell my parents. And I called them into the living room. And when I said, Dad, I need you to help me sell my car because I just bought Her Majesty Hair Salon, of all things. It's called Her Majesty Hair Salon.
Her Majesty Hair Salon.
It was 1980.
Her Majesty.
So, and I was so excited and I just wanted him to be so proud of me. And he took a step back and he looked at me and he said, well, honey, you're never going to be smart enough to be able to do that. And I really don't want to be a part of watching you fail. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, my life changed, Julie. My life changed. All of the lack of support up until that point in my life was right there in my face. And I made a decision. I will survive and I will thrive at any cost. And the cost over the next couple of decades was huge to myself and my family, So I think these things happen, we make decisions. So then I get there. It's the very first day. I buy the business. It's the first day. I go to check the first client out and I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I didn't even have change in the cash drawer. And, the woman was so sweet, but then, so I didn't know how to hire. I didn't know how to fire. I didn't know how to do bookkeeping.
You were 19.
I was 19. I had been out of high school for a year and a couple of months.
And you knew you couldn't call your dad.
And I couldn't call my dad. And what I realized back in 1980, there was no support system for young women in business. Look, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act only was passed in 1979. So up until that was the year I graduated from high school, you could still be fired for being pregnant. So this is how far we've come in these decades. So I was like flat broke. All my money was going to pay the rent and buy supplies and sort of spruce up the salon a little bit. And I had an assistant. And the only asset that I had access to were the clients who sat in my chair every day. And so I started asking them questions. One of the clients was a bookkeeper. So she said to me, if you want to come to my house on Tuesday nights, I'll teach you how to do books. In exchange, we'll barter. You'll do my hair every Friday morning, a shampoo and set, Yeah. It's how I learned to do bookkeeping, how I learned to hire, fire, interview, all of that. Those first couple of years came directly from the people sitting in my chair getting their hair cut.
But so smart. You were so resourceful, right? And it was your passion for this business and your passion to succeed and to show your father and yourself that you were going to do this no matter what.
Oh my gosh, Julie, those were some really rough, rocky years. You know, this was Pittsburgh in 1980. The steel mill had been the steel industry. Pittsburgh was known for the steel industry. And 9 months after I bought the business, the whole bottom fell out of the steel industry in Pittsburgh. And all of a sudden, most of my clientele were wives of mill workers. I mean, you know, and people started canceling appointments because they couldn't afford to do it anymore. You know, it was a really, really rough time in Pittsburgh.
Sure.
So I started really thinking, this is how I learned how to market. Oh my God, what do I do? You know, I have a skill. I'm very good at cutting hair. I won some really cool awards. And I thought, you know, my parents read the morning paper. What was coming to Pittsburgh was medicine. My cousin was a nurse, and I'm like, oh, if medicine's coming here, that's it. So I would give her stacks of business cards, and on the back, I would write, good for one complimentary haircut. And she was really pretty. She had great hair. And
Perfect.
she got compliments on her hair all day long at work, and she worked in a big hospital. So I said to her, Betsy, whenever you get a compliment, hand this card out, and I'll cut their hair for free the first time. And I knew that was it. That's how I rebuilt the business and learned the foundation of marketing.
Wow. I love that.
It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't.
Which day? And then it wasn't?
Well, a couple years later, 3 years later, I lost that first business in a fire. And it was very tragic. It was very tragic. There was on the lower level of the building where I was street level. And then around the back, there was like a bar and a restaurant. And then on the street level, there was a convenience store, my salon, and 2 apartments. And I got this call at 10 minutes to 7 in the morning. I lived at home with my mom. My dad died when I was 21. So he really didn't ever get to see what I was able to prove him wrong.
But he
my
did.
Mom and I
Watching somewhere.
Pardon me?
He did watch. He's watching somewhere. He's cheering on all your success.
Actually, I do feel like he's with me every moment of my life. I really do. But at the time, my mother and I used to go to morning mass every morning. We would go to a mass service. So it's 10 minutes to 7. We're getting ready to walk out the door. The phone rings, and it's the fire department. And they said, your building is on fire. We need to get into your business. We don't want to break down the glass doors. Can you get here right away with the key? Well, we lived a couple minutes away. We lived close enough away that when I sold my car, it was easy to walk to work for 6 months until I could afford to buy a new one a few years earlier. But as I pulled up to the building, my mom was in the car with me. And as we were pulling up, you know, news reporters were there and fire trucks, and it was crazy. And as I'm like pulling up, they're taking my friend who I went all through school with, who lived in the apartment next to me. They're carrying her out in a body bag. And I see this, and I just start to cry. And I look at it, and I'm like, oh my God, I've lost everything. Then I learned about insurance. You know, then I learned about insurance. So, you know, so basically, it grew. After that, I enlarged it. This is back in the day. I brought tanning beds in. Then we started bringing nails in. Then in 1986, I opened in Pittsburgh a salon and day spa. And this is how new the industry is. It was unheard of at that time in the tri-state region. Right. People would stand on the sidewalk, look at the sign, and come in and say, what's a day spa? The word spa hadn't hit America yet.
Wow.
You know, I'd been reading about it in magazines, and I'm like, this is so cool. I want to do this. I want to have facials and massages, and you know, so there was no
reading. And in your reading, where had one been? Obviously not in your town, but New York City.
No, I was reading international magazines in the beauty industry.
And it was in Europe.
They were in Europe. They were in Europe. And
so you were the first in America.
One of the very first. The very first woman that I know of, actually, her name was Noelle DiCaprio, and she opened a place in New England called Noelle the Day Spa. And hardly anybody heard of it. Nobody knew what it was. And it's like, and I knew I had heard about her, and I was like, okay, if she can do this, I can do this. I didn't know what I didn't know, Julie. I really didn't.
Yeah.
What did I know at this time in my early 20s? And,
Well, what I really love, the theme, the underlying theme here is you go for it. You go for it. You trust your instincts, you trust yourself, and you go. And you've seen success, and you've seen yourself work hard and get to where you're going. And when the road turns a left instead of a right and something unexpected happens, you reimagine. And that's an amazing thing.
I hired my first business coach when I was 27 years old. And I didn't even know, coaching was like so new at that time, but I had this friend who owned a very successful gas and oil drilling company. I cut his hair, his wife's hair, their family and their friends all came to my salon. And I started asking the wife, like, what sets your business apart? And she said, oh my gosh, we have an awesome coach. So here I am. I hire the guy. His monthly bill was more than my mortgage payment, so I worked with him for about 6 months, and it started occurring to me, the only thing he's doing is getting me out of my own way. And then I think here's the key. And I really want to share this for anybody who's out there, trying to grow anything. Mm-hmm. I never looked at things that didn't happen or didn't work out. Like, fine, I'm underinsured. Oh my gosh, I pulled out a bar stool and set up shop in my mom's garage, and I cut hair there until I could afford to get into my next place. And then I got better insurance. I never looked at any of these setbacks. The first employee who you catch stealing from you, who you trusted like your mother, and then you find out she's taking your products home and helping herself to your cash. Those things happen over and over and over in every business. In every single business, things go wrong. The biggest thing, I think, and I really do think this was because of my lack of maturity or naivete or whatever you would call it, I never looked at it as failure, because failure was not an option. I looked at it as feedback. That didn't work. Gee, I really didn't train that person well enough. I wasn't really keeping a close enough watch on my cash. Whenever something went wrong, I would just look at it like, how can I solve this? Because this is feedback that there's a problem here. What's the solution I could provide?
That's amazing, as opposed to, I think many of us go into the victim mode, right? And we start telling the story. We call all our friends, we call everyone, we talk about it. Can you believe this person stole from us? Can you believe this happened to me? And you focused on, okay, how do I change this around? How do I make it better? What tools do I need to implement?
Well, don't get me wrong. I still had a pretty big victim story going, though, Julie, as we all do, But yes, that was it. I didn't wallow in it. What was happening though was, while I was just grinding it out, building this business, building processes, putting systems in place, expanding, when I went from like 1 employee to 3 employees, that was a big growth point. Then when I went to 7 employees, that was another big inflection point. So as you're growing through business or anything in life, we hit these like ceilings of complex situations that we have to figure out how to break through that ceiling. And I never considered it to be the glass ceiling. I never considered myself to be anything less than a man when all that conversation was about breaking through the glass ceiling. I didn't care. It didn't occur to me that I was any different than any successful man. I was just doing my thing. I was just doing my thing, paying attention to, was I doing it the best I could? And I think as that was all happening, I was still, oh my God, I would beat myself up inside so much. I spent so much time with these self-limiting beliefs, but putting on this face like, yeah, I know what the heck I'm doing. Yeah, I got this covered. Meanwhile, I was dying inside. And I had to, pardon me?
How'd you overcome that?
I found a great therapist, and I did. I went to see her.
A business coach.
So I had, I worked with the business coach for a while, and then, sort of let that go and started thinking I could kind of do this myself. I got into landmark education. I started doing very, very deep when I was 27 years old. I went on the path of self-development work because I now had 8 years under my belt of owning businesses, and they were growing, but it was like, I want my business to reach $1 million in sales. So back in the 80s, women just didn't do that. Even today, Julie, less than 2% of women can scale a business to $1 million. Less than 2% of businesses owned by women ever get to $1 million. So I'm thinking, back in the 80s, this is really what I want to do. So in order to do this, I need to figure out why I stop myself, where I stop myself, why I'm like, oh, I'd rather you be my friend than my manager. All of that, all of that stuff. So I just started doing intense self-development work. And I found this wonderful woman who is a therapist, and I would ask her, like, what books to read. So pretty much every book that a therapist had to read to get their license, I was reading. I was going to the University of Pittsburgh bookstore and buying these books. And the one thing that I did that I also think was good, when I left college at 19, I really thought, like, besides the stress of going through college and working, what am I missing out on? And a big piece that I would be missing out on would be building my vocabulary. And I thought, well, how I would solve this was I would read. So I gave myself a plan, an agreement with myself that I would read a book a week. So I would start a book on Sunday and I would have to have it finished by Saturday night at 11:59. And I would read business books, self-development books, psychology books, trashy romance novels, Stephen King. It's like I'd read whatever I could read, but that was really helpful because here, at this point, I'm growing my business. And what's a business? You're managing employees and you're managing clients. And so I had 17 people a day who sat in my chair in front of me with different personalities that I had to quickly figure out, how do I get in quick relationship and create a background of a relationship here with these people so they're comfortable enough for me to have a pair of scissors right next to their eyeball, So it was fascinating studying human behavior. That was really my favorite piece of it.
Wow. I love that. I love that you gave yourself a by when and read a book every week, made it happen, read all kinds of different genres, and really learned about people, increased your vocabulary, increased your awareness and understanding of people and life and how things work. And of all these books that you've read over the years, which one do you turn back to the most? Which one?
I keep it right next to my desk. I will show it to you. This is one of my go-tos for 30 years. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Wait, there we go. The Prophet. It is, he's a philosopher, was a philosopher. And it really, when I start feeling out of balance, I'll just open the page and I'll find something there. So whenever I meet somebody or I'm going to somebody's house, I'll often take a copy of that book as a gift because a lot of people haven't been exposed to it yet. And it's really a fabulous book that's, one for the ages. Yeah. For business, whenever I'm taking on a new consulting client, I always have them read the book, The E-Myth Revisited. It's the entrepreneurial myth, really about business growth. It's excellent. It's an excellent book. Back in the 80s, the two favorites that I could remember were Positioning and Marketing Warfare. Those two were like my Bibles during the 80s as I was positioning my business in a market that didn't even know what it was. What's a day's pay? So, right.
A day's pay. Gosh, you'll have that forever. So you really brought the word spa into the realm of people here in America. But before we leave the subject of books, you also have written your own books. And these are very beneficial to anyone creating a business and who wants success. if people can't see, conflict revelation, the three essential elements for creating harmony in business. Streamline success, eliminate chaos from your service business.
You know, the book piece was really fun. One of the things that was really important to me as I was growing and opening multiple locations, I started really realizing that in order to replicate, I had to get super clear on my systems. And every single step in my business, I turned it into like, what's the process? And the process became a part of the system. And I started developing scripts. I mean, this really started, and this probably started about 1986 or 87. Staff people would hit me with questions all day long, and it was very distracting. So we had a rule: if you have a question, write it down. I'll answer it on the break. So I kept these questions, and I turned that into our first iteration of our policy and procedure manual. You have a question, here's a book, you know? So that policy and procedure. Yes, exactly. You know, started out as a couple page document, went on to cost me, I figured, $10,000 a page, and became about a 164 page document. But as I was, as anybody's,
really go and find the answers in the policy and procedure manual.
Well, when it was small enough, and they would, you know, when the policy and procedure manual was small and my staff was small enough, we had, you know, at that point, maybe 7 people. They knew what I was doing. Communication is the other piece of this. I think I was able to grow and maintain staff in a high turnover industry because I was communicating everything that I was doing about our business growth with my staff. We had weekly staff meetings. If anybody was uncomfortable with something, we would do mock conversations on selling, on upselling, on suggesting. You know, we did it enough that people were practiced enough that when they actually had a testy client in front of them, they knew the words to say because we had created scripts around everything for everybody to use. And here's the other thing that's really important. If you aren't telling your staff how to behave, they're making it up. And the way they're making it up is never going to be the way you wish they did or the way you think they do when your back is turned. And I really started seeing this in the late 80s and early 90s, that the true culture of my business was what happened when I wasn't in the building. That if the business ran the same with or without me, that meant the culture was really where I wanted it to be. I hired mystery shoppers. I'd send them in. I mean, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't filling my head with hot air thinking it was great when it wasn't. So, you know, so back to the streamline conversation. I think it's really important as you're in rapid growth to really document what people are doing in their, whether it's a business or a service, whatever it is, documenting it, because you really need to know what works and what doesn't. And so as I was doing that, I put myself in a business growth program based out of Toronto called the Strategic Coach in the early 2000s. And online gift cards weren't a thing yet. They didn't exist. Nobody even knew about them. Right. And I'm in a workshop one day and we were working on the bottlenecks in our business. What's the bottleneck in your business? The bottleneck for me at this point, I have an internationally recognized spa company. We've been on, you know, getting lots of media coverage. I have multiple locations. And the bottleneck was I had to close the business down for services on the 15th of December because so many men were coming in to buy gift cards. So think about this, like nothing was available online at that point. So I'm in the workshop and there were 17 of us in the workshop and I was the only female, then another female came into our group. So it was like men who were there. And I said to them, if you could go to where your wife might get her facials or massages on Christmas Eve and click a button on the website and it would print out, you could print out a gift card on your own computer, would you do that? And they're like, oh my God, Christmas Eve, we're begging people to stay open so we can buy our wives gifts. So by the end of that workshop day, I start formulating this plan that there could be an online gift certificate because gift cards weren't really even a big thing then. Right. So I met with 4 code writers from around the country, and everybody was laughing. I mean, Julie, they were laughing at me. Online gift certificates? Are you kidding me? Online gift cards? Maybe someday, but not now. So I was in Pittsburgh. I was introduced to some really brainiac kids from Carnegie Mellon University. Oh, the people that did Dell Computer's website, I met with him. He was based in Pittsburgh at the time. And he said, it will cost you $100,000 to build this platform. We can't really guarantee it's going to work the way you want it to because this technology doesn't exist yet. So I'm like, I can't afford that. Find these kids from Carnegie Mellon. And I said, if I give you $20,000, can you rebuild my website and put this click here button that people could print out a barcoded numbered certificate? And 6 months later, we went live on Christmas Eve, closed the spa locations down. I had 3 locations at that time, closed them down. And Christmas morning, like I wake up and I run to the computer and I open the program and we've done $21,000 in sales overnight. And I mean, but leading up to that past 2 weeks, I took our phone number off of everything. I don't want you to call me. I blew up our website, www.sewicklyspa.com. And that's what we were doing. All of the newspaper, this big burst, our billboards, our TV ads, purchase and print gift cards instantly from your own computer. I started putting press releases out. I started getting calls from around the country. I started another company called Spa Edge Inc. And an international magazine contacted me about a year later and said, hey, we heard you're doing this thing that's really changing things. And I was like, yeah, it's so fun. Julie, what the hell? I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't from the technology world. I should have hired a company to do this. I was like doing this from my home office.
This story is incredible.
It was so much fun. It was so much fun. So if you had a website and you had my program, people would click that button and it would seamlessly take you over to my website that was designed to look and feel just like your same color, same font. And I would get 5% of every gift card sale that you processed because you were using my system.
Brilliant.
It was really fun. It was a very, very fun time. So this magazine contacts me and I'm so excited that I'm getting this big interview in really the most prestigious organization in the beauty industry, and it's their international magazine. And so the writer starts really asking me deep questions about how the process works. And I'm forgetting that I'm being interviewed, and I'm like spilling the beans and I'm putting it out there. Well, sure enough, like 2 months later, the story comes out and I didn't get to proof the story. I'm reading the story and I'm going, oh my God, I just
share it all.
Yes. And, I didn't have it properly protected. But there was a piece of it where I couldn't really protect it the way I was doing it because these guys patched together pre-existing pieces of technology. But I could have had some protection on there. You know what? I didn't know, but it was a fun run while it lasted.
It lasted, and you learned a lot. It sounds like
Julie, it transformed the industry. It really did. So, and I love it that I got the credit for that.
Right.
So that was exciting.
Incredible. And then what came next?
So jump ahead, it's, so that was in the early 2000s. So it was 2017. My husband and I were living in Maryland, and we have a house on a lake in Georgia in a golf community. And I came down here for a couple weeks. And one of my neighbors was talking to me and he said, so what are you going to do? I mean, and I had been a keynote speaker at this point for 20 years, speaking on business growth at university level and for organizations and things. He said, what are you going to sell your company, your spa company? And I said, I love speaking. I love being able to move an audience. I love being able to inspire an audience. I love coaching my staff and watching them grow and blossom into who they were put on this earth to be. I love doing all of this. I'm just not sure how to transition full-time if I sell my company into that. And he said, oh, you need a book. Here, let me introduce you to this guy. So he introduces me to the mentor, Joel Bauer. He's from LA. And I fly out to LA. I meet Joel. He becomes my mentor. I do his first big workshop. I get on the airplane. I'm flying home. Major epiphany about how my father's story from decades before has still made me think there's a part of me that thinks I'm not smart enough to do it. So I have this major epiphany. Get on the airplane. I start writing the book. And so I called my son. So I have 2 sons who are now 31 and 35. Joe and Julie, and I called my older son and I said, you know, I really want to get it right with this book. This would be my first book out of the gate. And I feel like I have so much that I could give back to the service industry. We also own a restaurant, and service industry is hard. It's not for everybody, but people make it way harder than it is. And it's a high turnover industry because people don't understand how to manage conflict and growth, in my experience. And I said to my son, what do you think I'm best at? You know, what do you think I'm best at? And he said, Mom, you move through chaos faster than anybody I know. Chaotic things would happen. Like we had a house fire. We lost everything we owned. Like a couple days later, we're back up and running again. I had to go speak on a stage in New York. I mean, it was just like crazy things.
You don't wallow in the sad or the difficult times. You just keep going.
Pivot. I mean, what are you going to do? Stay there and think negative things about it? It's not going to serve you. Okay. You know, thank God I learned the insurance lesson. When we lost all of our possessions, except the clothes on our back in this house fire, we were very well insured because what I had gone through, 20 years earlier. So anyhow, he said, Mom, you know, things that would shut other people down for years on end, you would move us through in 48 hours. Like you taught us to be really efficient with our time and to not get caught up in chaos and drama. I really think it's about eliminating chaos. So hence Streamline Success, eliminate chaos from your service business. So, you know, I wrote the book and I got the first edition of the book back and I didn't love it. I thought, man, there's a little bit of victim in this book, a little bit more than I think serves a solution for other people. I met a fabulous coach, Jeff Faudalin. He approached me. He said, you look like Kris Jenner, but you really represent my ideal client, highly successful female with the book. And I said, well, you know, my book hasn't come out yet. So I started working with Jeff, and that was also life-changing, helping to release those negative stories and allow the light to come in.
Yeah.
And that was good. So after I started working with Jeff, I rewrote the first book. I called the editor. I'm like, you can charge me for another book because I'm delivering back to you a brand new book. And he read through the book and he called me. He was a guy in Canada. He said, Dorothy, two things. First of all, I love this book. And I didn't love the last book, but I love this book. He said, and I am editing a completely new book for you. And I'm like, all right, so let's be fair here. You know, charge me what you think is fair. And he did. And the book went in 48 hours. The book went to international bestseller. And that was exciting.
So exciting. Congratulations.
Oh, it was. And, you know, so then I started getting invited to speak on more stages, and people in the audience contacting me about taking them on for private consulting. And when I really started to see the kinds of results that I could produce with my clients who were younger or newer in business and help them scale their businesses up to the $1 million mark, it really clicked in. This is what I want to do full time. And so I sold my company last year, was supposed to sell the spa company. It was supposed to close the week that COVID happened. And the buyer was beside herself. I was well positioned with cash flow because, you know, you have to have your profit high if you want to sell your company for a lot of money. So we were in good shape. And I said to the buyer, this is an opportunity for you to see what going through a crisis in business looks like. And I'm going to step back and let you manage the crisis. And she was terrified. She's like, I don't know how to do this. I haven't run a business before. I had her work.
You're like, you are my 19-year-old self. Good to meet you.
Yeah. And, you know, and she was in her 30s. She's in her 30s. But I said to her, you are buying a business that you haven't walked through the fire that I have to get it here. And businesses run in cycles. Life runs in cycles. It's happy, it's sad. Business is good. Revenue's high, revenue's low. Staff is good. Staff sucks. Clients are good. Clients suck. I mean, it's always right like that. And so I said to her, I'm here. to answer any question that you have, but you get to learn how to do this. Run this through the crisis as if I'm not here. I'm your safety net, but I'm here. And so she did it, and she did beautifully at it. She nailed it. And so then, COVID, the shutdown, we're able to open up at 50%, then 75%. And she was an SBI buyer. And so we had to meet certain metrics. And it was a very stressful couple of months, but
she got through it.
She got through it. We found out at like 3:58 that the deal was going to happen the next day. And, so I now live 12 hours away. I'd been up, I went back to Pittsburgh to close down the deal, to complete it. Got COVID while I was there.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. But it's
good timing for you, huge learning opportunity for her, but amazing that she had you as her angel to guide her through that process.
It's really nice. And I love it. Here's the other thing that I see, and I really appreciate this about her. She gives me credit for starting the business that she's now running. I give her credit for being able to take it in a pandemic and really grow it. She's having 30% growth. And, so we speak and we celebrate her growth, and she's doing this with her passion and her energy. Right. And the experience that she had when she was managing it for me. So it's really beautiful. But I also think, when somebody is in our life that changes our life, giving credit where credit is due, really giving credit where credit is due, because I look at the growth that I had that would have never happened, Julie, without an amazing staff. Yeah. Right. My books wouldn't be here.
A lot of gratitude.
Yes. It's like making the gratitude bigger than what I've ever taken. And I feel like that. And, this woman worked for me for 12 years before she bought my business. She knew my MO, she knew how I operated. And and also there's a big ego piece to this. When people have success, they're not always willing to give anybody else credit because they want the credit for themselves, and nobody gets anywhere on their own. I mean, we might drive the bus, we might be the visionary, we might have the gut determination, and it's fun to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and start working when everybody else is still soundly asleep. That's the owner, that's the entrepreneur, that's the visionary, that's that person. But without a team around us, it's difficult to get the momentum to really scale anything. And and I think it all comes down to communication.
Yes. And really acknowledging all those around you, like you say, so important and so true. All goes back to gratitude.
Yes. So, now my company is sold. I get to work with, I have an online coaching group right now called The Time Class. You can check it out at thetimeclass.com. It's really, again, this was after we had the house fire and lost everything we had. I had just been elected as the first female and youngest person ever to preside over an international organization in the beauty industry. So here I am. I have my first marriage was very rocky. My children were young. We just lost everything we owned in a fire. And that same week, I found out that my business manager was my silent partner. We'll just say that. And I learned that when I went to the bank, and I said, "Is everything all right here? Because I haven't been here. I'm doing a lot of travel." And I found out that, our checks were bouncing when they shouldn't have been. So I had to let my business manager go while I'm trying to find a home for myself and my family. And I'm brand new, week one, as the international president of an organization that I'm so scared and over my head, I don't even know what I'm doing. And it was a couple months into this, I was sleeping 5 hours a night, and working 19 hours a day. I mean, working. I'd drop into bed, and Julian, my younger son, Julian he was about 4 years old. He climbed up on my lap. I was working from home with my fax machine and my big clunky computer while we were in a rental apartment with rental furniture, because we had lost everything in the fire.
Right.
Julian climbed up on my lap and put his little hands on my face. And he said, Mommy, you are just not fun anymore. Julie, you're a mother, heartbreaking. And in that moment, I said, it's time to deconstruct the chaos and the mess that I am creating in my own life and reconstruct it in a way that makes more sense. And I went to my kitchen here I am in this rental place. So we know that we're only going to be there for 6 or 9 months. So crap is like kind of everywhere. And, and I'm a neatnik by nature, but here we're living in this temporary, everything was a mess. And I'm like,
and you're busy with your business and your kids and everything else.
So here I go into the kitchen of this apartment that we're renting. And I just started alphabetizing my spices and organizing. And then I went into the rented furniture where my kids are. And I start putting a crescendo of color on their clothes. And I deconstructed and I came up with 5 areas of life that I really think is where our balance comes from. And this is what I teach on in the time class. It's so much deeper than time management. And it's fortuitous. Our session last week was on aligning your passion, your higher purpose, your passion, and your career. So that we're talking about this is just beautiful. But it's these 5 areas I believe are physical is where we start, our physical being and our physical space. Relationships, if our relationships aren't in order, nothing is working. And it's this, the saying, how we do anything is how we do everything. If our relationships, our interpersonal relationships aren't great, our relationships at work are suffering from the same, might be different strain, but variation of that situation. So it's physical, relationships, spiritual. We get so disconnected when we're overwhelmed. We disconnect from our higher purpose, our spiritual being, and we think it's all about us, and it's so not. And then our career or learning, and then finances. And they're in that order because that's really how it goes. Money means nothing if our health isn't there. Mm-hmm. Career means nothing if our relationships are falling apart and we're not fulfilled. Mm-hmm. So it's really in that order. And that's what we spend time going way, 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 way deep in those areas.
And this is a group class.
It's a group class. It's a group class that I run a couple times a year. And then I co-coach with Jeff Faldalin. We co-coach another program called Program for Prosperity, which will be starting again in, I believe, March. We're looking at the dates right now. And that is a very intense, deep look at how we have been programmed to not come from a place of abundance and prosperity, but how we've been programmed to play the small game.
Yes.
And it's really exciting. It's really exciting. So I'm excited getting ready for that one.
In that program for prosperity, you've done it before. What have the outcomes been from that? Can you share?
Oh my gosh, life-changing for the people who are in it. I mean, around Christmas and New Year's, I was getting private messages from people saying, my life is forever changed. Everything is bigger. I'm doing way bigger things than I ever thought I would have. It's the same thing both in Program for Prosperity and Time Class. In those last sessions, we really start to design, what does the life you look like you want to live look like? And then if we stand in the screen of the result that we want, and we look back at ourselves today, what needed to happen to get us there? And the biggest thing is your mindset needs to shift to believe that you deserve what you want. Because we put ourselves in victim mode, Julie, and it's so crazy. I mean, we all do it. It's human nature. Yeah. We judge and compare ourselves to other people who have more, who have done more, who have accomplished or achieved more. And the minute that we can put ourselves in this comparison, I'm judging myself against them, we slip subconsciously into victim mode. And the very minute we slip into victim mode, we can't be creative or growth minded because we're feeling sorry for ourselves.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the constant, how do you get out of there? How do you move away from there and not let it creep back in?
Right. And, when things happen, instead of looking at it like, woe is me, this happened to me, it's just, this happened, and now what am I going to do with it? Now I'll share a brief story. I lost a brother to cancer when we were younger. I was 14. He was older than me. He was married and had 2 young daughters, and it was just a horrific cancer death. And we watched him. He was a state trooper, big 6'4", and the day he died, he weighed less than 100 pounds. It was very devastating for our family to go through, and it was very rapid. In 10 and a half months, he went from healthy to gone. And it really, when you lose a family and you watch your parents lose a child, it changes your family, and it creates some kind of way that we get to be. For me, it created kind of a sense of passion. So 2015, I was on the hospital foundation in the community where we lived. I was the vice chair of the foundation, and I had also been the president of the Health Planning Council for Western Maryland. My husband is also a cancer survivor, but everybody in my family has died of cancer. My father, my grandmother, my best aunt, like our friends, everybody was dying of cancer. And we lived in this sort of rural community where people got cancer at the same rate as the rest of the country, but they died at one of the highest rates in the country. And it was because you had this really wonderful pocket of wealth around the lake, but if you moved back a half a mile, you had abject poverty. So when it was getting ready for me to come on as the foundation chair of the hospital foundation, I knew that my husband was going to be retiring and we would be moving to Georgia probably within a short amount of couple years. And that wouldn't be fair to the hospital. So I said to, the people I was working with, the development director and the current chair, what I'd really like to do is a project. I would really like to raise money to build a cancer care center in Garrett County, Maryland. And they're like, the economy was kind of tough at that point. And what I realized was, if I made the conversation and the statistics so widely known, so the owner of the newspaper was a friend of mine, and, let's pump these statistics out there. Let's put the statistics, the death statistics, in everybody's face, because I'm about to go on a campaign to start talking about this. So, my husband and I chaired a campaign we called The Force, and we got 6 of our friends together and we said, we need to raise $500,000. One of our friends at the end of the 90-minute breakfast said, Dorothy, we need $1 million. So we started really mapping this out. We had our first big kickoff event. We poured a lot of wine. And then I got up on the stage and I shared what it was like to live in a rural area and have my family shredded because my brother had to travel for cancer care. And that's what was happening here. And then we gave the statistics. And then I asked people to write checks. And I had painted this picture. I'm dumbing it down into a paragraph here, but it was creating a vision so strong and so big that our community couldn't imagine at the end of that night not having a cancer care center in the community. And that night we raised well over $100,000 with people who weren't even sure what they were coming to a party for. And in 9 months, we raised $1.9 million.
Incredible.
And we've saved over 2,000 lives in that community so far.
That's beautiful. And that really came from your heart and from your own stories of what you went through, of what you saw family members and others go through. And when we can access our vulnerability and connect deeply with people, they show up.
Julie, people have said to me over the years, because I've been speaking on stages for a lot of years, like, oh my God, I could never get up and do that. Like, how do you do that? I could never. And, there are people who say public speaking is the number one fear. I don't know. I think it's snakes or spiders or something. But, I think if I had to remember what I was going to get up and talk about, I couldn't do it. I can only speak about what I know to be true. Yeah. And what I knew to be true at that time was that community was losing people because we needed a cancer care center. And so, getting back to aligning our purpose with our passion. So, if I cared, look, I was doing a keynote speech a couple years ago, and I was really sick. I was really, really sick. And it was on The Power of Your Story. And it was for a regional company. And there were a couple hundred people in the audience. And I was up on this weird catwalk kind of stage. And I'm sneezing and my nose is running. And what are you going to do? I'm the keynote speaker. I can't call off sick.
Yeah.
And so I did this like transformation mechanism. I'd like blow my nose over here. I'd move to the other side of the stage. I'd sort of reorient their thinking. Nobody remembered that I did any of that. It's really interesting little trick there. But, it's that I'm going to say three clarifying questions that allow me to know, am what I'm doing is operating in my highest purpose. There was a reason I started telling you that story, but I can't remember. I got off track here for a second, but
so as a matter of fact, Dorothy, we are actually going to have to continue on next time when we meet again, but you are an absolute wealth of expertise and information and just life of knowledge. Thank you so much for being.
Oh my gosh, Julie, I know I could go on.
And so. I love that. I love that you have so much passion and your purpose is just beginning. I mean, I feel like you have so much more to do and so much more to create in this world and to help others along their journey. I love that you offer coaching now. I love that you are passing on all of your expertise. And I can't wait to do this again with you and to join some of your workshops. And I hope others will as well. Your website, tell us.
StreamlineSuccess.com.
Great.
Streamline Success. And there's a little field if you fill out the email, you get some really bonus things like, things that I've charged $1,000 for, you get for free. And it's fun. But that way, I don't send emails every day. I don't send emails every week. I don't even really send them every month. I send them before an event's coming out.
Perfect. Yeah. Dorothy, Andreas, so good to be with you. Thank you, everyone, for watching The Julie Chan Show, where passion meets purpose.
This broadcast is brought to you by WINJECT Studios. We are an all-in-one educational platform for podcasters that revolutionizes how hosts leverage content to increase engagement with listeners, downloads, and income. We come together to focus on community, collaboration, and collective impact. For more information on how you can interact directly with our hosts, access exclusive live content with offers you can't get anywhere else from our official partners, join our purpose-driven community by visiting www.winject.com. If you're ready to build a career doing what you love, then we're ready to see you there.